and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Merryn Johns.
And we're not on our usual set because we're going to have some guests for the second half of the show.
Yes.
But we'll talk about that later. Of course, you all probably heard about the U.S. Supreme Court hearing oral arguments over whether states can ban gender-affirming care for minors.
And we have some more frightening pics from Trump for his clown car cabinet.
It's true, and the major effect they're going to have on our health agencies. Mm-hmm. Peggy Caserta, a countercultural legend who was once the lover of Janis Joplin, has died.
And Joe Biden did a lovely thing for us by marking the final World AIDS Day on the White House South Lawn.
Yes, we had a rare win, wait for it, in Uganda.
We have some more anti-gay raids and arrests in Moscow.
Escola, the star of Oh Mary, was in the Thanksgiving Day parade. We'll show you that picture. And we're going to show you the woman who's taking over his role on Broadway for a while.
Their role. And he's back from London and is bringing some fabulous theatre reviews for us.
Okay, including a smash gay revival from the 19th century. And we'll be joined by international human rights activist Peter Tatchell.
And then after that, we're going to talk to film director Rosemarie Reed, who's done this fabulous doco on Alan Turing.
And others persecuted under the UK laws, the laws that we've had for a long time here in this country as well. Okay, so before we get to the Supreme Court, I just want to mention that the Montana legislature defeated a proposal to restrict restroom access at the state capitol based on birth sex.
Wow,
A couple of Republicans went with the Democrats. This was targeting Zoe Zephyr, who's a state representative, the way the U.S. House Republicans went after the Congresswoman-elect Sarah McBride of Delaware. But all the Democrats voted against this proposal and a few Republicans. And by the way, the U.S. House, at this moment, they've counted all the races. There are 215 Democrats and 220 Republicans. And Republicans are going to lose some to the Trump cabinet if you can get them through. So it's as tight as a tick. And yet Trump is acting like he won some great mandate. All right, let's go to the Supreme Court.
Yes, they were hearing, the Supreme Court heard the United States versus Scrimetti. The hearings have begun this morning here, Eastern Time, around 10 a.m.
Yeah, they're done now.
They're done, right? And basically this is, the hearing is about whether or not the Tennessee's ban on transgender medical treatment for minors.
Yes, there are 26 states that have these laws.
But this one, Tennessee, why is this case important? Andy, what is this?
Well,
and
they're calling it the marquee case of the term. There's our Supreme Court. So it's hard to be optimistic with this crowd. Listening to them talk about it, I wouldn't say they were foaming at the mouth, the conservatives.
No.
But the interesting thing was they kept citing foreign evidence. Well, look what happened in Britain with the Cass report.
And
Sweden, they're all questioning this and stopping this and curbing this. I mean, usually they reject all foreign evidence or foreign law and everything that they do.
Yeah.
But they're very open to it here.
And
our side, what was argued by the Solicitor General of the United States, Elizabeth Prologer, and by Chase Strangio, who was an out trans lawyer. I think they did very well. But the court seemed to have too many questions about it, and I'm not optimistic.
They're stuck on still the concept of whether or not intervening in a minor who is suffering from gender dysphoria is going to do more harm than not.
Right. And they're basing it on, our side is basing it on sex discrimination here. Justice Kagan said, well, isn't this really a matter of trans people versus cisgender people? The first time we heard the word cisgender in the Supreme Court, I think. That's progress, I guess. And, Justice Barrett, well, why don't we wait until they're old enough to decide, that kind of stuff. And Justice, anyway, so it's hard.
So what's the next step? What happens now?
They can decide it any number of ways. They can send it back for reconsideration under certain terms, or they can just say we uphold the law. And I mean,
and that's that.
You can't predict completely, but that's what I would predict in this case.
Yes.
We'll have more analysis on that, I guess, next week.
Yeah.
But they did try not to sound rabid while they were arguing it. In fact, Justice Kavanaugh said to the Tennessee Attorney General, why not just let the states decide? Why not let the parents decide, not the states? So, but who knows? Okay, let's move on. And Minnesota, by the way, Supreme Court heard the case of trans J.C. Cooper. This is a famous case, who was excluded from USA Powerlifting, which says they are excluding on the basis of male physiology, not gender identity. So they've heard the case. We'll get an outcome there. Let's talk about the Trump appointees.
Yes.
By the way, vis-a-vis Trump, we're reading that gay couples are rushing to get married across the country before he takes office because they're so worried about what he's going to do.
Is it? Interesting. Happened in Italy.
He can't stop it unilaterally himself, but we're more worried about the Supreme Court.
Yes.
All right. Now, Trump appointees?
Yes.
They're turning over the CDC. Of course, we're very concerned about this in the AIDS community, to this Dr. Dave
Weldon.
Yeah.
Now, he was a former congressman. I'm not sure when, but he's Trump's pick to run the CDC, if you can believe it.
He's a doctor in private practice from Florida.
In Florida, he is. But the problem with this...
He's got to run the CDC.
Right. It seems like a big leap up to suddenly be running a $9 billion venture with 13,000 employees.
But his views align with RFK Jr.'s,
Yes.
who he's worked with for 25 years.
Yes.
And by the way, Mike Bloomberg, who runs a public health, foundation and everything, he said having RFK as head of the Health and Human Services is a tremendous danger to public health. I mean, just out and said it. He wants Trump to reconsider. If not, he wants Republicans to try to stop it.
Now, when you say his views are in line with RFK, I mean, he is known to be anti-vax, although he has said a few times, Dr. Weldon, that he does administer shots to kids. He is an anti-vax, but he did go on the record saying he believed that study that there is a link between vaccinations in children and autism, which has been discredited, that study, by the way, I assume.
Well, I will say he was one of 3 Republican sponsors of PEPFAR, which, the $15 billion program for HIV, TB, and malaria programs in poor nations. But
it's a bit of a mixed bag, huh?
And then we're talking about the guy for the FBI director.
Oh, Kash Patel.
Oh, he wants to get rid of the FBI, basically.
Right.
He's a former aide to Trump toady, Representative Devin Nunes, always trying to disprove Trump's connections to Russia. He works for Truth Social, and he hawks Trump's T-shirts. He wrote a children's book about that is concerned with King Donald.
Oh, boy.
And he wants to bring the FBI back to the days of Hoover. I don't know if this guy's gay like Hoover, but he wants to bring him back to those days.
This is another example of Trump padding out the cabinet with loyalists rather than people qualified for the task.
And losers.
Well, I mean, I don't know. This guy believes that the FBI is part of the deep state. So the fact that he even believes in the deep state is kind of telling you something.
And then there's Pete Hegseth, who looks like he's toast now.
Right.
This is the week his mother accused him of mistreating women for years. She tried to repent of that. She says, I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, and cheats and sleeps around. But the sex stuff didn't bother Trump. It was the drinking, I think.
Oh, was it?
All these colleagues who said he was drunk on the job, and because Trump says he doesn't drink. And
No,
he
he
doesn't like
doesn't.
people who drinks.
Yes, interesting.
So who are we going to get?
DeSantis, don't you think?
I mean, the guy who wants a war on woke, which is what Trump wants with the military.
That's the only kind of war he knows, isn't it? The war on woke. So look, I don't think that's a good outcome either way. But I'm actually worried about DeSantis being head of defense.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then Trump's former Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams, Trump's former Surgeon General, warned Republicans, set on imposing people like RFK and these others, that the Republican Party is going to own any and all preventable outbreaks and harms going forward. And Scott Gottlieb, who was Trump's FDA commissioner, said we face a grim and avoidable resurgence of once vanquished childhood diseases. So we're in trouble.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Okay. In California, you've heard that Kamala Harris may run for governor, right? In 2026, when Gavin Newsom is term limited, Caitlyn Jenner says that she might run against Harris and that she will destroy her. Now, Jenner entered the unsuccessful recall race versus Newsom in 2021 and got 1% of the vote.
Can you imagine what a circus this is going to be?
Well, at least Jenner is allowed to use the women's room at Mar-a-Lago. Right.
There you go.
God.
Interesting.
All right.
NYPD, did we want to talk about that appointee? Are we up to that yet?
Are we there? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just thought to balance things out a little bit, the NYPD has appointed an out gay man, Ryan Marola, to Chief of Staff.
There he is with Jessica Tisch, who's the new police commissioner, the second woman appointed to the job by Eric Adams, and the second in history.
I mean, can we take this appointment at face value, Andy, or what's going on?
Well, all I can say is that Ryan Marola once served as the executive director of the Gay Officers Action League, the 40-something-year-old organization for gay cops. He helped coordinate the name of the group is GOAL, Goal's response to the Pulse Massacre in Orlando in 2016.
Yeah, that's right.
So that sounds positive.
Yeah, positive step in the right direction.
Less positive is Richie Torres. Now, he's an out gay U.S. representative from the Bronx. He's running now for either against Governor Hochul in New York in 2026 or Mayor Adams next year with a big field of liberals and others. He keeps slamming Hochul and Adams almost daily, attacking them, saying they have blood on their hands because a mentally ill guy in my neighborhood and Ann's new neighborhood was slashing people.
Right.
It was terrible.
That was terrible.
But you know, all right. But
You disagree with him, or do you agree with him?
No, I mean, look, you want to solve the problem of mentally ill, homeless people who are committing crimes and things. It's not just it's not just a criminal justice issue. It's a housing issue. It's a treatment issue. We don't have the facilities for these people, and the taxpayers don't want to pay for it. So everybody says, get them off the streets. What are you going to do? You've got to have the facilities to help them and to, where they can get monitored drug treatment and everything else.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, but I did know that Adams has cut a lot of the city budgets. So.
Well, there you are. So anyway, Richie keeps saying the Democratic Party has lost its way. It's too liberal on a range of issues. But he was exposed by the Jim Owls Liberal Democratic Club, a gay Democratic club, for filling out a form 2 years ago where he took all these liberal positions on immigration and everything else. And then Richie tried to say to the New York Post, a staffer filled that out. I take responsibility, but I've changed. So come on, And he attacked Alan Roscoff, the president of the club, in very personal terms. So Richie wants to be the hard guy.
We'll see.
The Catholic Diocese of Rockville Center, Long Island, is settling $323 million on 600 survivors of clergy sex abuse, and they're making the parishes pay for it, depending on how many abusers you had and how rich you are. So this is a lot of money.
Is that where your tithing goes?
And all they really care about is keeping gay people out, not these molesters.
Right.
All right. Let's talk about somebody we lost this week.
Oh, Peggy Caserta. Yes, this is a fascinating individual. So you might know that Peggy Caserta was rumoured to be, allegedly, or we believe she was, Janis Joplin's lover.
She wrote a book about it.
Days. She wrote a book about it, but she sort of stepped
back.
That
our director, Rich Spezielli, read when he was 12 years old.
I know Rich ran out to buy it when he was 12. I love it. But anyway, she died at 84, which is a pretty ripe old age for a junkie, don't you think? I think good on her.
Lifelong addict.
Lifelong addict who battled sobriety. But this is how their meet cute was fascinating to me. So basically, Peggy ran a clothing store in San Francisco famous, called Nasadika, which is after a character in Sappho. Anyway, this clothing store, I suppose it's a little bit like something we'd have in Park Slope, Brooklyn today, where all the queer kids could drop in and get kitted out in their denim flares and excellent clothing. So Janis walked in one day, wanted to buy a pair of flares. She only had 50 cents to put down on a pair of jeans that cost $4.95. So I think Peggy liked the look of her and they hit it off from that point on.
It was a hangout for the then penniless Grateful Dead.
Yes.
And it's where it also served Jimi Hendrix, Chris Christopherson, Sly Stone. Peggy and Janis both struggled with addiction, and Janis's friends blame Peggy for Janis's death, but we don't know.
But Peggy didn't want to be part of this threesome, apparently, so she said, I'm not getting into that. And
but it's a colorful story.
Colourful story, but anyway.
Part of history.
Rest in peace.
Okay, shall we go to World AIDS Day?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I mean, this is historic. So this is when we say it was the final World AIDS Day. We don't mean that. We just mean for the Biden administration. But
probably for the White House.
Probably for the White House. But to use the South Lawn like that, to display the beautiful AIDS quilt, which has thousands and thousands of hand-sewn cloth squares.
And a big red ribbon, AIDS ribbon, covering the south, not covering, but the 2 floors of the south portico of the White House.
Yeah, and this is all part of the Names Project, in which all of the deceased were named.
So Jean White Ginder, the mother of Ryan White, spoke and talked about how they got the Ryan White Care Act passed with Biden's help when he was a senator. Biden, during the ceremony, urged a 5-year extension on PEPFAR, the International AIDS and Other Illnesses Program. Trump, as president, redirected Ryan White funds to pay for his family separation policy. So things will be different. Biden called on the states to repeal outdated criminalization laws, and Trump's team is, filled with anti-LGBTQ people who are going to gut HIV programs. And the Assistant Secretary of Health, Admiral Rachel Levine, also spoke on World AIDS Day, not at this ceremony, but she paused to remember the fact that 39 million people have died of AIDS around the globe in a plague that spread out of control from 1981, as Ronald Reagan did nothing to stop it. Didn't even speak of it for 6 years, but she announced a new rule easing the transplants of livers and kidneys from donors with HIV to recipients with HIV and expanding the liver donor network. Okay.
Makes sense.
All right. Now let's go to some entertainment news.
Okay.
Okay. By the way, I said Michael Cerveris, who stars in Tammy Faye as Jerry Falwell, who was very good in that. I said he was gay. He's not gay. Our viewer, Andrew, called me and said there's no evidence of that. He played, of course, gay in Fun Home. He was the dad.
That's right, yes.
And he won a Tony for it.
Yeah.
I think I'm right about that, aren't I, Andrew?
Yes, you're right about that.
Okay. All right. Elton John?
He's losing his eyesight. You tell us about this.
Yes.
You know more than I do.
Well, there was the opening of The Devil Wears... He wrote Tammy Faye, by the way, which bombed in his closing. But he also wrote The Devil Wears Prada, and there he is with Anna Wintour, who's sort of portrayed in the thing, Donatella Versace.
Is it Vanessa Williams?
And Vanessa Williams, who plays the lead. But he said, I haven't been able to see the performance tonight, but I have enjoyed it. He is totally losing his eyesight completely. He's relying more on his husband, David Furnish, to get around.
At least he's not losing his hearing, which would be dreadful for a musician.
Okay. Cole Escola of the Broadway hit.
Yes, he's finishing up in Oh Mary. And they've had
show him at the Thanksgiving Day parade.
Look at this. I mean, look, I do adore them. And
he's riding a flamingo.
I love it. But, I'm going by they, you're going by he. I think they go by both. I'm not sure. But anyway,
sorry, you're right. You're right.
Right. We have a non-binary person here. But look, Cole has had this incredible experience with O'Mary, and they're going to be leaving the run, and a new person's going to be coming in, who is a cisgender actress called Betty Gilpin.
That woman is a woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know what? There is a lot riding on her shoulders because that's a tough act to follow, I think.
Well, they've been playing Mary Todd Lincoln, and I guess they're going to come back and play it because it's going to run through June 28th, through the Tonys.
Right, but they need a break. I mean, that's a lot of work. If you've
They
seen
do.
the show, it's a hell of a lot of work every night to pull off.
But Betty Gilpin will be doing it for 8 weeks starting January 21st. It's broken the box office record at the Lyceum Theater 10 times. She, Gilpin, is an Emmy nominee for her role on Glow on Netflix, and she's a big fan of Escola, who she calls a demented genius. All right. By the way, Barry Manilow, who broke Elvis's record of number of performances at the International Theater, has now been given a permanent lifetime residency at the theater there in Las Vegas. 81 and still going strong. All right. My London reviews, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I don't have too many.
I'm so excited and envious.
As many of you know, I have a hearing problem, and they don't have good hearing devices in a lot of London theaters, so I'm skipping some of the shows that I saw. But and I'll give you the link to these reviews if you sign up for our email, gayusatv.org. By the way, end of the year, this is also the time we'd appreciate if you can. To make an end of your donation. It's tax deductible to Gay USA. Go to our website, gayusatv.org. You can do it there. But anyway, I saw a great revival of Oscar Wilde's 1895 play, The Importance of Being Earnest. Ooh. You know, they closed it when he was arrested for gross indecency. Right, and that was it for him. But this is at the National Theater. Well, there's, the whole cast there. It was done in a very gay fashion, but they were totally true to the text. In other words, they took that text seriously. You know all the lines for this play. It's iconic, and they did very well. So in the next picture, we have the genius casting of Sharon D. Clarke. Now, she was in Death of a Salesman and won the Olivier Award for that, played it on Broadway. As a West Indian Lady Bracknell, and it works so perfectly. It's amazing. And on the right there is Nshuti Gatwa, Doctor Who himself.
We love him.
And of course, he plays Algernon, and Hugh Skinner plays Jack. So making it even more gay, it really worked. It wasn't ridiculous. It was a wonderful production.
You think Wilde would approve?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. He would have had a ball. Then at the Kiln Theater, I saw something called The Purists, which explores gay and race themes on a Sunnyside Queen stoop by Don McCabe. The old white guy is bisexual, who's a purist about Broadway musicals. The black guys are purists about hip hop. And they sort of have culture conflicts. And there are two women involved, a white and a black woman. But nothing is as black or white as it seems. And there are some deep gay themes in there as well. Then at the Finborough Theater, a pub theater, I saw Lies Where It Falls by Irish actor Rory Canogan, who has the same name as his uncle, who was assassinated in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, when this guy was 8 years old. He's now in his 50s, I guess. So, and then he goes on to play an IRA bomber who bombed Margaret Thatcher and all those things at Brighton. So it's all about him dealing with the trauma that he never dealt with about his uncle's death, and I thought it was terrific.
Wow.
And then at the King's Head, the BBC's Jonathan Maitland did something called, that's now closed, How to Survive Your Mother. Something some you may relate to.
The answer is?
It's not gay, but it's certainly got a gay sensibility. The mother is an outrageous character. I mean, it's about how he copes with it. He has actors playing himself at various ages. But she runs a gay bar in a small town. That's how
that's fabulous.
Out there she is.
How did it stack up against the Jessica Lange, the play here by Paula Vogel? Remember that one? Also about a mother.
Oh, right. It had a lot of the same kind of feeling. Anyway, we're done.
Okay.
Nice to be back. Okay, international news. Uganda.
Where do we stay? Yes, Uganda. A little bit of good news out of Uganda.
The High Court Civil Division awarded $40,000 in our money to 20 men who, we told you about this, who were tortured by the police after their 2020 arrests for alleged homosexuality. The police beat them, burned them with a hot piece of firewood, undressed them, anal exams, torture, psychological torture, based on just suspicion of homosexuality. And it's a significant victory, Frank Mugisha says, for the LGBTQ community. But don't forget, Uganda has the Anti-Homosexuality Act, which includes some death penalties, which is estimated to have cost the country $1.6 billion since it passed a year ago.
Similar, but not quite as bad, but nevertheless terrible oppression in Russia. Moscow police are raiding lots of gay bars over the weekend. There were 4 bars in particular, nightclubs that the patrons were, 12 people were arrested. And the charge is really bizarre. It's like Orwellian. It's like absolute nonsense, but it is one of these LGBTQ propaganda.
Yeah, they arrested the guy who runs the gay travel agency for planning a trip for supporters of non-traditional sexual values to Egypt for New Year's.
There you go. And this is all part of the Russian Supreme Court's banning of, trying to ban the international LGBTQ movement as though it was an organised extremist movement. But more on that when we talk to Peter Tatchell.
We will. Nepal has 2 transgender candidates running for local offices for the first time. They elected a gay guy to parliament years ago, but this is a first there. We'll keep you posted on that. Georgia which passed an anti-gay law, is now the ruling party is now put talks of EU membership on hold for 2028, and that's triggered mass demonstrations, which is encouraging. I don't know if it's going to lead to anything.
Poland passed a good law too. Didn't the government say that it is now going to be a criminal act to spread anti-LGBTQ speech?
Yeah, they're adding sexual orientation, gender, age, and disability to the hate crimes law. And I'm always wary of laws that prosecute speech, but certainly for acts. And Romania's centrist party edged out the far right, electing a highly fragmented parliament, but the far right is advancing there. Maybe we can talk to Peter about some of this, a trend over there. And then in the United Kingdom, 16 trans kids protested the national ban on puberty blockers at Victoria Station, saying you're letting us die. And then we had a breakthrough for a trans model.
Oh, yes. 21-year-old Alex Consani has won one of Britain's preeminent fashion awards for World's Best Model. This young trans woman, she's 21 years of age, hails from Sonoma, so is actually American. And in her speech, she thanked black transgender women for creating a space for her in the zeitgeist, which is pretty terrific. Not everyone's happy about it, but it's a step forward.
Now we're going to turn to Peter Tatchell, and the Peter Tatchell Foundation, which he heads, had a protest this week in London to protest the state visit of the Emir of Qatar to Buckingham Palace on December 3rd, calling him a sexist, homophobic dictatorship which has the death penalty for homosexuality. But King Charles gave him a state dinner and the Prime Minister welcomed him. However, this demonstration, the people who were there protesting said they saw us, the Emir and the King, and that they got a smile from the Princess of Wales. So let's turn to our guest.
Welcome,
Tatchell.
Peter.
Welcome.
It's lovely to have you here.
Great to be back.
Peter, you've been a human rights activist for how many years now?
58.
Just 58
Only
years.
58.
And you, of course, we've had Peter here before. The documentary about him called "Hating Peter Tatchell" is on Netflix.
It was on Netflix.
Oh.
It's come off now.
Okay.
But we're hoping to get it on PBS or one of those channels.
We do hope so. So let's start by talking about this. You have taken on these Commonwealth nations. There are so many of them, 56, I think. And what kind of progress are you making in getting them to drop their anti-gay laws?
Well, you're right. There are 56 Commonwealth member states. These are former British colonies who are now independent, but are part of this loose federation of states called the Commonwealth. 29 of those 56 still criminalise same-sex relations. 6 have life imprisonment for same-sex relations. And 4 have the potential of the death penalty, either explicitly or potentially. So Brunei, Nigeria, parts of Pakistan, and of course Uganda have the death penalty. And this is completely against Commonwealth values, which are about human rights.
And you've actually been to Qatar to protest this. We have a picture of you there. The first time a gay protest was ever held there. What was that like? When was this?
This was just 3 weeks before the 2022 Football World Cup was held in Qatar.
That's right.
So working with underground, secret Qatari human rights defenders, I went there to highlight, in particular, LGBT plus rights. The fact that in Qatar, LGBT plus people are harassed on the street by the police, they're arrested, jailed, and can even, if they're Muslim, be potentially sentenced to death. In addition, Qatar has secret conversion centers where there are abusive practices used to coercively change people's sexual orientation.
Or try to, yes.
Try to, yes. But in addition, of course, Qatar also abuses the human rights of women. Women have to get the permission of a male guardian to marry, travel, study, get certain jobs.
And the football authorities don't seem to care. They're looking at Saudi Arabia now, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is headline position to get the 2034 Football World Cup.
So, Peter, what is your fabulous foundation doing to apply pressure to people like the royal family? Because the King and Queen were just in Samoa, which has 3 separate acts against consensual same-sex activity that were actually brought in 2013. And we think of all the lovely Pacific Islands, but the fact is they're incredibly homophobic.
Yeah, I mean, the Commonwealth really is a roadblock.
Yeah.
You know, for over 40 years, I have personally tried to get LGBT plus rights put on the agenda of the Commonwealth Heads of State meeting for nearly 40 years. I've tried to get them to listen to the voices of LGBT plus people from Commonwealth countries in Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and so on. Every single time they've refused. They won't even discuss the issue.
Wow.
So it really is a big problem, but we are making slow progress. So, you know, countries like Botswana and Mozambique, members of the Commonwealth, they have in recent years decriminalised homosexuality. So has Singapore. So we're going in the right direction, but at a glacial pace.
And as much as people had affection for Queen Elizabeth II, apparently the words gay and lesbian never passed her lips publicly, did they?
That's right. I mean, she's the patron of, or she was the patron of hundreds or thousands of charities, but never an LGBT plus one. She never visited an LGBT plus charity. And as you say, the words lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, as far as we know, never ever publicly passed her lips. I mean, it's not even an acknowledgement. She didn't even acknowledge our existence.
And you've been to protests where you've seen her, yes?
Yeah.
But never able to get her attention.
No. Well, sometimes she's seen us, but, you know, basically looked the other way.
Progress. So you've talked about some of the progress. You've also have had this campaign to get police chiefs around the United Kingdom to apologize for their past anti-LGBTQ persecution. What kinds of things are we talking about here that they're apologizing for?
Well, of course, although there was a partial decriminalisation of male homosexuality in 1967 in England and Wales only.
Explain what partial meant in 1967.
Well, it meant if both partners were aged 21 or over, sex was in their own private homes with no other person present in any part of the house and with doors locked, windows locked, and the curtains drawn. Anything other than that was still a criminal offence.
Wow.
Two men meeting each other on the street, that was a criminal offence. If I allowed gay friends to stay in my house for a weekend, that was a criminal offence.
Even in the 80s, I remember Harvey Firestein saying to me, two guys just sort of kissed goodnight on the street, like an effect, not even a sexual kiss, and were arrested for it.
Wow.
Yeah, that happened in London, of all places, right up until the early 1990s.
Wow. And we're going to talk more about that when we talk about this film.
The film, yeah.
So how much progress are you making on these apologies, and how hard is it to get these police chiefs to understand what they did was wrong?
Well, of course, they argue that they were merely enforcing the law.
Right.
But they put huge resources into arresting gay men, bisexual men, for consenting victimless behaviour. Plus, people were often beaten up. People were arrested for kissing or holding hands or cuddling in the street. They got beaten up. That wasn't lawful. Private birthday parties were raided and people were beaten up. The police acted illegally. So in England and in Britain, there are a total of 45 police districts. So far, we've got 21 of them, 21 chief constables, police chiefs, to apologise. That is about 5 times more than in any other country in the world.
Sure. We got an apology for the Stonewall raid on the 50th anniversary,
Right.
but not for the thousands of arrests that the New York Police Department has been doing forever.
Yeah. But what's really good is these 21 have not merely apologised, they've also, at our behest, introduced new progressive LGBT plus policies, like appointing LGBT plus liaison officers to work with the local LGBT plus community, like setting up special homophobic, biphobic and transphobic hate crime hotlines. So these are not just the apology, but the new progressive policies.
And what can people who are listening to the show, who live all over the world, mostly in the United States, but all over the world, what can they do in their localities to get a campaign like this going?
Well, we simply wrote to the chief constables, the police chiefs, and set out the kinds of behaviour their force conducted in the past, and said that we think this demands an apology, that we can't draw a line of the past until they've said sorry. And this would actually help build confidence and trust.
So people
of
would have
LGBT
to
plus
research what their localities were doing to us in order to get...
Or what they're still doing in some countries.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, there are still police stakeouts, to catch gay people in parks and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, still here.
Okay. Peter, we have another picture of you at the National Gallery, the National Portrait Gallery. There it is. You've got a new picture there. Your old picture said gay terrorist. It was. Tell us about that and tell us about this.
Well, this is a portrait by the lesbian artist Sarah Jane Moon. She mostly, but not entirely, does portraits of diverse characters from the LGBT plus community. And I was one of them. And when the Britain's National Portrait Gallery, the most esteemed gallery in the country, saw the portrait, they decided to acquire it.
Nice.
So it's a huge, huge honour. But of course, not just for me.
And it's a big one on that wall with all these people who are really people who have been making good social change in Britain, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just there.
Yeah. No, it's a huge honour, but I would add, to me, it's not just an honour for me personally, but for the campaigns and the people that I fought for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the world.
The world?
Yes, I mean,
it's
your take on it. We want it. I mean, what's going on, the trends in politics and human rights and those kinds of things.
I mean, I do want to know, Peter, what's your view? Because it feels like the world's going up in flames, that we've got multiple wars. The fear is they're all going to join up. But in amongst that, the intersectional issues of gay rights are human rights, women's rights are human rights. Is it getting lost? Are we going to have to shout louder now because there's so much chaos out there?
To quote Martin Luther King, the arc of history bends towards justice. And I think that
if we bend it.
if we bend it, yes,
bend it.
we have to bend it. But, despite the setbacks, the overall trajectory is in the right direction. So if you look, for example, at the criminalisation of same-sex relations around the world, 40 countries have decriminalised homosexuality in the last 4 decades, and more are doing so.
Yeah.
More and more countries are introducing same-sex marriage or civil unions. More and more countries are introducing protection against discrimination in housing and employment. So there is a backlash in about 20 countries, but that's only 20 out of 196 countries. So, overall, we need to be recognise that the dangers and the problems, but also keep our eyes fixed on the achievements.
Right, zoom out, as they say in the stock market.
Well,
I'm wanting to encourage people to sign up for Peter's newsletter, because it's a great way to stay in touch with your activities and also to have this big picture thinking, to see what's happening all over the world.
how do they do that?
How do they do that?
Well, My Peter Tatchell Foundation sends out a weekly news bulletin with about 6 or 7 stories, key human rights stories, including LGBT plus ones, every Thursday. You can simply go to the website petertatchellfoundation.org in the top right-hand corner, there's a button which says Join Us. You just give us your email address and we will send you the weekly bulletin. And of course, you can unsubscribe at any time. There's no fee, there's no charge, it's totally free.
But you have an odd mix now with political trends. There is a right-wing trend around the world, certainly in my country. Of course, Britain went for Labour, but with only 33% of the vote, Labour got a landslide and changed the government. And there's an odd mix. President-elect Trump just appointed an out-gay Treasury Secretary. That didn't seem to bother anybody because he was doing it. But he's also speaking horribly against the trans community, and God knows what he's going to do to LGBTQ rights and marriage rights and all those kinds of things. And then people vote for Trump, and then they vote for abortion rights. So there's an odd mix in these things, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a very dangerous period we're in, not just in the United States, but in Britain and many countries around the world. There is a rise of the far right. My take on it is that not in every case, but in most cases, the right-wing appeal is primarily coming from devastated, deindustrialized communities who've lost jobs, high unemployment, no hope, economic devastation. People are angry and they're lashing out. They somehow think that, this protest vote against the far right will solve things. Of course it won't. The other thing I'd say is that if you want to counter the far right, given that prognosis, then the way to do it is by creating new jobs, investing in improved housing, education and healthcare to give people hope in the sense that they're not being ignored, not being left behind. Because that's the real appeal of the far right. It's appealing to this anger, this despair of people who've been neglected.
And I worry that, you got a Labour government in there, but they didn't run on expanding this very much, did they?
Absolutely, a very, very small C conservative agenda. Again, the other thing we need to do to counter the far right is to create a united front. And it means, we have to work together with people who we normally would not agree with. We have to work even sometimes with, quote, liberal conservatives. The left, the centre, and liberal conservatives have to work together to unite to maximise the opposition to the far right. And history shows it's only when you have a united front in these kind of situations that you win. A united front can win, but if we fight each other and remain in our own corner and forget about the common ground, the common threat that we all face, then the far right will continue to make ground.
Very true. We saw this with Macron and his very hasty coalition to win the election. It is possible. We do have to build more bridges. Yes.
Well, Peter, you're also featured in a new documentary, Forgetting the Many, The Royal Pardon of Alan Turing, which is about the persecution of Alan Turing, the guy who broke the Nazi code famously, although nobody knew about it at the time, during World War II, and about the many who are persecuted under these laws. We have a trailer for that, and then we're going to bring in the director to sit with you and talk to us about it. Here's the trailer.
I have to live with the fact that I'm going to have a criminal record for the rest of my life.
There was no reason, to condemn homosexuality within the African understanding of homosexuality prior to colonialism, prior to the missionaries coming into the continent itself.
On the 17th day of December, 1951, at Wilmslow, being a male person, committed an act of gross indecency with Alan Matheson Turing.
Not many people know the contribution that Alan Turing made, which was immense. Not many people know the contribution he could have made in the future, because he was only 41 when his life came to an end.
It's not absolutely set in stone that he did commit suicide. My grandmother always was firmly convinced that it was an accident.
I've done nothing wrong, so there is nothing to pardon. It'll be my pound of flesh.
I don't want a pardon. If you accept a pardon, means you accept that you were guilty.
I would like a pardon because my original conviction brought so much shame upon myself and to my family. and it's affected my whole ability to just get on in life.
Are now joined by Rosemarie Reed, award-winning producer with bases in New York and Berlin, who has pursued subjects in Paris, Moscow, Sydney, and what brought you to England or Britain for this story?
Well, I had been producing and directing a series on women in science, and this is 20 years ago, and I had some grants from the Sloan Foundation and the National Science Foundation, and in the middle of researching my work on women in science, I came across Alan Turing. But because I was doing women in science, I couldn't do him. But he went in the back of my head, and I started to follow his story. And then I found out more about what happened to him, and it was purely total injustice. And I knew I wanted to pursue, because he was a scientist, first of all, and then, of course, the issue of that he was so abused. That's all I can really say. And then I did my research, and I found Peter. And we started working 10 years ago on this project. Wow.
Yes, of course, a lot of people know the story now from The Imitation Game,
yeah,
which starred Benedict Cumberbatch, but you're getting into the real facts of his life here.
I always like to say my film picks up where the end of that film ended, when there was a sign that said 49,000 men still remain. And that's where my film picks up. And I look at what happened to the men in this story.
Oh, it's so moving. I have to really compliment you on the way you braided the facts of Turing, or what we know about Turing and the real life men like George Montague and Kevin and so many of them. So recently too.
Right, and so Kevin and Montague and David Bonet still. I'm sorry, not David Bonet. It's Kevin and Alan Jolly. They still don't have pardons because they had the audacity to have sex in a public space, in a public toilet. And maybe you may think that's not a good thing, but to ruin someone's whole life for something so minuscule seems to me a big injustice.
I have friends my age who were arrested for that.
Exactly.
I got away with it. I'm not ashamed to say, but I mean, again, they will not give you a pardon for it if it's still considered a crime.
Yes, exactly.
And of course, if they catch non-gay people doing stuff like this, they just say button up and move on.
Slap on the wrist.
They don't make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
What's great about this film is that it is the Alan Turing story, but it also tells the story of the tens of thousands of other gay and bisexual men who were also prosecuted like him.
Many after the initial decriminalization of homosexuality.
Yeah, after the partial decriminalization of male homosexuality in England and Wales in 1967, the number of arrests increased by 400%.
That's incredible.
The police were ever more vicious than before.
Wow. Now, you also add sort of a new dimension you don't get in The Imitation Game to the story of Alan Turing. You have his niece and his grandniece in the story, giving us their perspectives, and they gave him a lot of support, but they also questioned this narrative, which I think gay people sort of blithely, or eagerly embrace. Oh, you tortured him and he committed suicide, and he may not have.
Yeah, there is in the film. There's a very important newspaper article that we found through the help of King's College at Cambridge University, which was sort of lost, and we found it, and it basically said. The coroner said he just assumed that he killed himself because people like that kill themselves. They're mentally unbalanced. So we felt that was very important because if you ask me personally, I don't think he killed himself. I think it was an accident.
I agree with you. I mean, they found a lot of chemicals in his house, but he was a scientist who played with chemicals, often carelessly.
Yes, carelessly. He used to lick his fingers, and his mother would say, "You're going to be sorry one day. This could really be." And the experiments were going on. When they got to his apartment, they saw that these experiments were still going on. And it's very possible. Right. And the important thing is that they never tested the apple. for cyanide.
That
Nothing.
he supposedly ate and blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you have Gordon Brown, the former...
I was so impressed that you got Gordon Brown on board, and also Ben,
the former Prime Minister.
Former Prime Minister. How did you approach him? And Peter
Peter helped me a lot with getting in touch with Sarah
Sarah Brown.
Right, who was very, very wonderful. And then they introduced me to their PR person, Carmel Nolan. She was fabulous, and she worked with me and really wanted to do it. And we went up to Edinburgh, and he came and he did a fabulous job.
And how did Ben Whishaw get on board as well?
Oh, right. Ben Whishaw is the narrator of the film.
I called his agent, and I said, this is what we're doing. I sent them the script. It was still not completed at that point. I sent him clips of the film, and he agreed to do it.
And if you're going over to London, he's starring in Waiting for Godot at the Haymarket Theatre.
He's a terrific actor.
Yes, wonderful actor. But you widen the focus here to all these men, some of them in the military, some not, who were still being arrested for this, and it could ruin your life forever.
Yeah.
How?
Well, you can't get a job. You can't. Many of the men, their families left them. Their families, said, no, we can't continue like this. Loss of jobs, loss of integrity, loss of self-esteem, loss of financial independence. All these things for an act of what they consider gross indecency, or having sex in a public toilet. Totally destroy people's lives for something like this.
And
Injustice.
Many of these men, they had their names and addresses published in local newspapers, which provoked attacks upon their homes. They were beaten up in the street. It was so shocking.
And the case of Kevin, who committed really the double offence because it was a minor he was hooking up with, but he didn't know that.
Yeah, he didn't. He was 16 years old, and he thought he was having sex with someone older than him.
Yeah.
And it winds up he was 5 or 6 months younger. And now he is considered a pedophile.
Right.
Now this is horrible. Talk about brilliant young man, really smart. Total life destroyed.
These are the kinds of stories told in the documentary. It's premiering at Cinema Village on December 6th right here in New York, and it's going to run for a week. It's got many showings there. You can see it there. And I imagine you have hopes for getting it on streaming services?
Yes, of course. We're in the middle of doing that now. It's been in a number of different festivals around the world, actually.
Right. Yeah. And then tell us about George Montgomery, who we have a picture of him, who was like almost 100 when you interviewed him?
George Montague?
I'm sorry.
Montague.
Is it Montague, I apologize.
The oldest gay in the village.
Yeah.
Montague.
He wrote, and I read his book. He gave it to me, signed it, and I read it within a few days. He was a character. Unfortunately, he died. He wanted to live to be 100 so that this old queen could get a birthday card from a real queen. But he died 18 months before that.
They do. They send a letter out. You get a telegram from the monarch if you make your centenary. It's really charming. But do you know what I really also admired about this film was it wasn't like a total downer, which it could have been. There's real moments of levity and joy and humanity. What did you take away? Did something sustain you? It's a 10-year journey to get this done.
I spent a lot of time with these men on film, because I would go over it and go over it and go over it. And I felt that it was just that I wanted to give a sense of hope, that there's so many things that have been accomplished, and that that in the future could even be better, like in the Commonwealth countries, which is also part of my film. And I really thought that I wanted to leave people on the upside. And at the end, I won't tell people what the music was, but we did a lot of photographs, used a lot of photographs of everyone who was behind the camera, including myself, including the camera people, so that because they were all very much a part of making this film. They loved it. They loved being a part of it. People didn't make a lot of money, but they wanted to be a part of this film. And so I felt, let me put them in some way. And so I took all those pictures of them, or they gave me their pictures at the end. And
you have journalists and scholars giving the whole history. It goes back to Henry VIII, apparently, that monster.
1533, yeah.
Right. And by the way, we have a little bit of news since the film was made. Navy veteran Martin Hammond just got his apology after a 40-year battle.
Golly.
He was dismissed from the Navy, held in detention for 40 days, had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
He's 60 now. He got his apology and a special badge, and he can apply for compensation. And that's what some of, they are offering a compensation scheme for the people persecuted under these laws, but it's not much, is it?
It's a derisory £12,500.
Derisory.
Probably about $15,000 for a wrecked life. Yeah. I mean, some of the men, like Stephen Close in the film, who was convicted of consenting gay sex when he was just in the early 20s, in the early 1980s, for 30 years he couldn't get a decent job because every time he applied he had to give a history of his employment.
Background check.
And his military record said, dishonorably discharged with disgrace. So no employer, serious employer, would touch him.
No.
So he lived in extreme deprivation for 30 years. Right. So this compensation that's being offered is derisory.
And they're not even fighting for compensation here in the United States. They're just fighting to get them veterans benefits and things like that. By the way, a viewer wrote to me when I was going to do this to say that the drugs that they made Alan Turing take to suppress his libido, it's called DES. Yeah. It was given to pregnant women in the 50s and 60s to prevent miscarriages and resulted in disease in their offspring.
Yes, I'm a DES daughter. And when I was 28, I had cervical cancer. And there was no reason for it except for the DES.
Oh, really? You suffer. You've got something in common with Alan Turing here.
Wow.
I mean, in terms of this. No, it's just an awful thing. Yes. So what else we only have a few minutes, but what else do you want people to know to make them want to come see this film?
Can I just add about compensation? My Peter Tatchell Foundation is not only championing the right of a decent, proper compensation for military personnel, LGBT military personnel who were forced out of the services. They lost their jobs, their homes, their pensions, their medals, everything. But we're also campaigning for compensation for all the tens of thousands of other men who were convicted under these historic
who are also featured in the film.
Yeah, precisely the men featured in the film. The government should compensate them. France and Germany already has a compensation scheme. We're battling to get a compensation scheme in Britain too.
So you're not forgetting the many.
No.
Not forgetting the many at all. And in fact, one of the things I added was the whole issue of the Commonwealth countries, in particular Nigeria. It's worse there. The anti-gay laws were there when the British were there, but they've stayed. Those laws have stayed on the books and made worse. Yeah. As you said before, 14 years in prison in Uganda, in Nigeria. People are being stoned to death. People are being burned alive.
So why are they rejecting this colonial influence, or does it have to do with their own natural homophobia?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things is the influence of the evangelical movement from the United States.
Well, we keep blaming it on, yes, and they're a big influence, but these things are readily embraced by the people of these countries.
You colonized, and this is what happens. It's like, how many times are they going to be colonized?
They can think for themselves on a lot of issues, but not on this one. They remain very anti-gay, you know?
I mean, it's something they latch onto that they believe will make them stronger. And I think that's a particular psychology of a colonized people, if that makes sense.
And there's the influence of money.
Yes.
Brought in by the evangelicals and others. Corrupt politicians, corrupt priests or ministers, whatever, being paid off to say that it's that being homosexual is horrible.
Absolutely.
It's called Forgetting the Many, the royal pardon of Alan Turing at Cinema Village and perhaps at other film festivals around the country. We thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Peter Tatchell, Rosemarie Reed, and we look forward to seeing the opening of the film.
Such an honor. Thank you so much.
On Friday.